what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the VPYA podcast, where we just dive in a little bit deeper into the message that we delivered this past Tuesday, and we talk about cool, fun stuff on top of that as well. Hope everybody's doing good, and right here we have a couple of friends of mine. If you guys want to introduce yourselves, first of all, I'm Matt Sanchez.
Yo, I'm Christian Alvarez.
And I am Elijah Jones. How you guys doing today?
Yeah. We've got kind of like this this interesting thing over the next 2 weeks, because we typically will have whoever's preaching on the podcast. Mm-hmm. Eli preached this past Tuesday, and I think I preached the Tuesday before.
Yes.
So, I mean, I'm already on the podcast. Yep. So we had Eli come out as a guest, and now he's our preacher. Yeah. And in 2 weeks, you're preaching again.
Yeah.
So,
oops.
Over the next few weeks, it's just
get real familiar with our faces.
Yeah, the Christian, Matt, and Eli show.
Yeah, that's good. But we were talking about work relationships. We just closed out our series. Matt and Sarah, you guys spoke first about romantic relationships. Christian, you spoke about family relationships, and then Tuesday was work relationships. What do you guys think of the series altogether?
I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
it was really awesome.
I think it's good because I think in a lot of ways we were able to talk about relationships from a perspective that doesn't get focused on as much, right? I mean, I feel like we live in a pretty romantically obsessed world. And so, I mean, you just see that based off of what's even popular on TV, right? Like one of the biggest shows for what's it been, 20 plus years is The Bachelor, and like people are still watching that garbage. Like no offense if you like The Bachelor, no offense.
I think it's safe to say, man. Yeah,
but it's pretty trashy TV. You know, it's a lot of people's guilty pleasure. My guilty pleasure back when COVID hit was Love Is Blind. I don't know if you guys watched that.
No,
but
yeah,
I'm not proud of it, but I did, and season 2. But we get so obsessed with, you know, this idea of finding our soulmate, and because of that, I think even in churches we talk about it quite a bit. Yeah, but we're able to talk more about kind of some of the neglected relationships over the past few weeks. And so, you know, talking about family a couple weeks ago, and then talking about work relationships, which honestly, like that's something that I feel like barely gets covered. We talk about how we are to work, but not the people that we work with.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, so during my message, I was talking about, you know, what is work from a biblical viewpoint? What are the foundations of work, and how God, he gives us work so that we can be sanctified, and then we work to serve others. So I talked about biblical manhood, biblical womanhood. The 4 P's for men are priest, prophet, provider, protector. And then a biblical woman is a Proverbs 31 woman, a Titus 2 woman. And then all of that to say is we work to reflect Christ and show people the love of God through our work. And that was basically what the message was altogether. But the foundational point was the gospel. You know, we have to have a gospel-centered mindset in our work. So,
man, I love the way that you just took like a 35-minute message and you were like, here's the 30-second snippet, man. That was impressive. But yeah, that's exactly what you talked about, right? Kind of covered like the whole gamut of things that you touched on in your message. And one of the things that I love that you kind of opened with was, building this theology of work, building this idea of why do we work, and what's the attitude that we're supposed to have towards our work, because that's what we see with God, right? Like let's kind of open up the floor to talk a little bit about that. What should our relationship with work be in light of how God has created us and equipped us and called us to live and to work?
Yeah. You want to kick that off, Matt?
Yeah. So I believe that, you know, when we are in our work environments, I think that our mentality of what we live while we're at church should be the same. You know, definitely also kind of there's some conversations that you may be able to have a lot easier in the church environment as opposed to your work environment. But I think the way you present yourself and you move yourself should mirror that same image that you bring, you know, to church, or hopefully that you bring, you know, throughout your everyday living and throughout the week. Because sometimes like we can go to church acting a little bit differently. But I think at work, it's just as important too that we kind of try to mirror that image of what God wanted us to be. And that's, being respectful to our coworkers, whether or not, they may say some things that we don't agree with. And then especially with bosses, I think that's a big one. And so I think that's pretty much like sums it up for my end.
Yeah, what I was talking about at the beginning of the message was how we're made in the image of God, and we're supposed to be his image bearers. And in that, we're supposed to reflect Christ in everything we do. And, Christ's ministry on earth, he said, I didn't come to be served, but to serve and give my life as a ransom for many. And we should have that servant mindset when we go to work. If we come to church and we're serving a kids ministry or young adults, whoever it is, right? We should carry that same attitude when we go to work as well.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, you both touched on this idea of working as a reflection of God, and in that like there should be consistency in that too, right? That Matt, you were talking about this, but the way you are at church should be the same way you are at work.
Yep.
And it should be the same way you are with your family.
Yeah.
And it should be the same way you are with your spouse or your significant other, right? Like, I think, I mean, even James talks about this idea of being double-minded, being a person who is two-faced, right? That you're one way with one group of people or in one setting, and then you're a completely different way in the other. And, like, that's not what we were created for, right? That we were created to image God, and in that, like, if we're imaging God one way and then doing it in a completely different way, what does that show about God? It shows that he's wishy-washy. It shows that he's inconsistent, and it gives a horrible representation of who God is, right? Yeah. So I think that just kind of builds on like this idea of the way that we are at work is so important to our testimony of who God is, right?
Most definitely.
Our mindset and our attitude shouldn't change based on our location, wherever we're doing works. So
that's good.
All right, I always like when we get to talk a little bit about our lives. Like I've told you, Matt, I feel like I've learned so much about you just from being on a podcast together and being able to ask, the questions that I guess typically we just don't ask in day-to-day life.
That's true.
So what was your first job?
My first job, I was working at Target in the food court section.
Let's go.
I was and at the time they were partnered up with Pizza Hut, which they're no longer partnered up with them. I don't think, or I haven't seen Pizza Hut in Targets.
Hey, if you are the person who makes those decisions of who Target partners with, let's get that Pizza Hut back in.
It was packed too. And it was Pizza Hut and then Starbucks right next to us. And it was an awesome experience. Definitely kind of it was left to us, really. It was just me and then two other girls, and we were kids, man. I was 16. And it's like, how did they just leave us with the food court? Not only that, but leave us handling food for people. Like it was quite an experience. So that was my first job.
You're like, I don't even know how to cook for myself, and you want me to make food for all, you want me to work in a food court.
That's good.
For me, I joined the military as my first job. 17 years old, still a senior in high school. I joined the Army National Guard and went to basic training a few months after graduation. And that was my first job, and that was the majority of my work experience throughout my life was in the military. Going to the riots, going to the fires, doing recruiting. Definitely interesting experience when it comes to my first job, for sure.
Yeah, that's different, man. That is way different. Yeah. Mine was more like Matt's. It was I worked at Kmart as a seasonal
R.I.P. Kmart.
Seasonal cashier.
Man.
R.I.P.
Nostalgia.
Yeah, it was the one out in Riverside too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
The one that shut down.
I drove past that the other day.
Yeah, man. My brother-in-law worked there in like a managerial role, and so he got me a job there, and it wasn't supposed to be seasonal, but I was hired with all the seasonal people. And so they called me into the office one day. It's like January after the holiday season's over, and they're like, hey, so we're not going to keep you around. And I was like, oh. I was like, but I'm not seasonal. They were like, no, you are.
Wow.
So I don't know if it was just that, like, You know what? I think it was I was really bad at selling credit cards, but from my perspective, I was like, no one wants your stinking credit cards, dude. So I got let go because of it.
Mm. What would you guys, with the mindset that you have now, biblically, or where you are in life, how would you change those initial stewarding opportunities at work?
That is a great question.
Yeah. I know I would change a lot of different things.
Yeah. I mean, I was really, really shy. I was 16, just like you, Matt, when I started working at Kmart. And, I was stoked when I was at school because I was like, man, I got cash. Like, all you fools are broke. I was like, I got money. Yeah. And, but when I was at work, I was just like nervous. I really wanted to do a good job. You know, I was afraid of like being caught off task and everything. And so, I mean, I don't think I really like worked in a way that didn't honor God, even though I wasn't following him at the time. But I guess part of it is like, man, I just didn't really leverage any of the relationships that I was building or any of the interactions that I had for God's glory. Yeah. It was kind of just this place where you go, you do the work, you leave, and you move on with your life, right? So I would like to see how I could have made a bigger impact in people's lives when I was there.
Yeah. Basically the exact same thing for me. There was so it was me and one girl that worked with me at Pizza Hut, and then at Starbucks it was these two sisters that worked there. And we all like got really close together, like, like we'd hang out even after work and stuff, like we're really close. And I mean, obviously at the time, like just like you, Christian, like I wasn't really living for God, but at the same time I was not kind of living a lifestyle that would think, okay, this is against God. I was just living life respectfully, being very nice to people and things like that. But I wish what I know now, if I knew back then, man, there were so outings that I could have like brought up something that they would have shared with me, where I knew like, man, that thing that they shared with me, I could have easily been like, you know, let me invite you to church, like let me show you the truth, and that would have been awesome. But
for me, my experience was so much different, just because in the military, people don't treat each other well in a lot of ways. There's a lot of cursing, there's a lot of drinking, all that different stuff. And in that, I think I'm starting off, because I wasn't saved yet, I wasn't born again, but I could have been a light to a lot of people, because even at basic training, people were going through tough things. I lost a close friend. A lot of people were losing family members, being far from home, and people breakups, all types of things when you're miles upon miles away from your family. And I could have really poured into those people in those times and been a light for them, but instead, I just left them on their own. And it's like, knowing what I know now, if someone in the church or one of my friends was hurting, going through things, I'm gonna bear their burdens with them. And that's the same thing that I could have done with my coworkers at work at the time. So that's definitely something that I look back, I'm like, man, I could have changed that for sure.
Yeah, it can be really easy to disregard some of those relationships, because you differentiate work relationships from
church relationships,
from church, or family, or just general friends, right? Like for me, a lot of the people that I worked with, I didn't hang out with them outside of work, and so it was like, once I leave work, I don't know you. Like there was just no relationship there.
If I saw you at the store, please don't look at me.
Yeah, but like you were saying, man, it's just, how do we leverage every relationship? Not in a manipulative way where we're only ever being loving to people with this kind of motivation of like, I'm gonna get you, you're gonna follow Jesus, but like in a way that is just genuinely like, hey, I love you with the love that God has, right?
Yeah,
that's for sure. I don't think it's super loving to have that surface relationship that doesn't go beyond anything surface level, right? There's no love in that. There's just, it's just like being okay with people, tolerant of people. But no, we're not called to tolerate people. We're called to love people.
100%.
Right? So there are 3 key relationships that at least I can think of. I think maybe we can get into if we want to extend the list, maybe 4 or 5. But 3-ish key relationships that I thought would be good for us to kind of spend some time talking through. And that is the relationship between you and your superior, so you and your boss, the relationship between you and your coworkers, and the relationship between you and the people underneath you. And maybe even in that, we can talk a little bit about if you work in, a service industry job like me or Matt did, how do you even relate to the people that you are serving? How do you relate to the customer, right? But let's kick things off by talking about our relationship with those in authority over us. Just what does that relationship typically look like? What have you guys experienced, and what should it look like?
Yeah. For me, I've always had good bosses, thankfully. Like, I've been extremely blessed to have Christians as my bosses most of the time, which is an amazing blessing. But even in Ephesians 6, verse 5, it says, slaves, obey your earthly masters. And that's exactly what we're called to do. We're called to, obey those people who God has placed in our lives to have authority over us, take direction from them, grow in obedience from them, and really just honor them the way that, Christ would honor his own Father, and treat them in that way so that they can look at us and be like, hey, this is someone who's reliable, I can trust, I can depend on to get the job done. So
yeah, that's good. I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Also too, I think having the mentality of, don't have the mentality of that you're working for your boss, but that you're working for God.
Yeah.
Like, treat this job as if though, like, God really has or is the one that gave you that job to begin with. So let's treat it that way. Because a lot of us can see or not agree with some of the decisions that our work boss or our earthly boss is telling us to do or going along with in plans or meetings. But I think it's important to be like, well, you know what, like, but then again, there are boundaries of what to do and what not to do.
Yeah,
but I think to like always have the mentality of like, you know what, like, I'm gonna wake up early in the morning and work as hard as I can every moment I'm at work until the time I'm off, because I'm doing this for God. And I think that's like something that would help you continue going in those days where you're just exhausted and you're just tired. You're like, I don't want to be here. So
Yeah, that's good. Eli, you had shared with us a verse earlier that I think kind of speaks to that pretty well in Colossians. You want to bring that up?
Yeah, Colossians 3:23 speaks on it as well. It says this in verse 22. It says, slaves, obey those who are your human masters in everything, not with eye service as people pleasers, but with sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord. Whatever you do, do your work heartily as for the Lord and not for people, knowing that it is from the Lord that you will receive the reward of the inheritance. It is the Lord Christ whom you serve. Yeah.
Man, that's such a good word, because it puts things in perspective that, you might think that the work that you do is for your boss or for your superior, but at the end of the day, no. Like, you are working for God. You are working with him as your authority. Everything that you do in your job is to reflect him. And so, like, why would you stroll into work late all the time? Why would you do why would you do a job half-heartedly? If you were working as though you were working for the Lord, you would do it with everything that you have. You would strive as much as possible to make your boss proud, to make their job easier, to make it so that they have nothing but good things to say about you, right?
I think that really carries over into ministry as well. Looking at you as my leader, I read this book called Deacons, where it talks about lifting up the arms of our pastors. And that's the same thing that we should be doing in the church, trying to relieve different stress and responsibilities off of the pastors. In the book of Acts, the apostles, they were praying and teaching. So they selected deacons to wait the tables, to take care of the different other matters. And it's the same thing that we should be doing at work for our bosses, making sure, hey, am I knocking out all these different tasks so that I can relieve stress off of them, and we can have a more well-oiled machine here at work.
Yeah.
So
that's good, because it speaks to ownership too, right? If you view your job as, this is my boss's deal, this is my boss's company, then you're expecting them to care so much more, and you don't really have to care all that much because it's their thing, it's not mine, right? Yeah. But if you say, no, I want to benefit this company, or I want to benefit this organization because I am a part of it, because it's mine, then like that's a game-changing thought. And it's the same thing with ministry, right? Those people, they were able to do the work that to the level that they did because of the fact that they knew this isn't Paul's ministry. This isn't just, this isn't just John's or Peter's or James' ministry. This is my ministry.
Let's go.
And so I think we need to have the same mindset when it comes to work. Okay, this is my job.
Yeah.
It doesn't even matter the people around me, what they're doing, the ethics that they have, right? I am going to come into work and I'm going to do the best job that I can, right? That should be our mindset every time we go.
I think that ties well into prayer as well. If we're going to be praying for our pastors, our leaders here in the church, then we should be praying for our supervisors, our managers, our companies in that same way. Paul, he's talking to Timothy, he said, pray for all people, kings, etc., so that you can live a quiet and peaceable life. And if we don't want our managers, our supervisors lording over us, if we don't want to go to work and hate it every single day, we should be praying and interceding on behalf of our companies in a lot of ways too. So I think that's an important part of work, is really praying for our bosses, our coworkers, our customers, everything. So
yeah, I agree.
You guys ever have a bad boss?
Not like direct boss, but I had a first sergeant in the military who God is good. Let's just leave it there. Just differences that there's things you can't control when you're at work. And I think that actually leads us to another point. What do you guys think you should do if your boss or your manager tells you to do something that's unbiblical or unethical, or tells you to lie or cheat someone out of something? As Christians, how do we act in those moments?
My gosh, dude, that's a hammer right there. Because we all know the obvious answer, right? We know as Christians we need to say, I can't do that. That's something I'm not supposed to do. I'm not capable of doing, and I'm not going to do it. But then we also start juggling on the other hand. Man, but this is my job. This is what pays my bills. How if I lose this job, what's gonna? So you start not gambling. You start juggling these two different things. But ultimately, one's gonna weigh out the other, and that's gonna be the choice of maybe sitting down with your boss and having a private discussion, and being like, hey, I respect you. I respect you being my manager or my boss, my supervisor. But this is something I'm not agreeing with. I can't do this. And if this jeopardizes my job, I mean, there are legal matters I can bring on the table. This is not something that you can hold up against me. But I think we need to stay strong in any position that we face. We can't show any weakness, because like how you were sharing earlier, Christian, how if you're talking about the wishy-washy, if we're supposed to be a mirror image of God's liking and doing and love, if we start showing these compromises, then we're just basically saying like, well, God's a compromising God. And
it makes me think too, just with this whole idea of if your boss or manager or superior, if they ask you to do something unethical, it was making me think of last night we were talking at youth. We were talking about the book of Ruth, and I had brought up this point about how Elimelech. If you guys, there's too much context that I won't get into, but Elimelech, he's Ruth's father-in-law,
brother,
and he leaves the land of Judah. And, he brings Naomi and their two sons into Moab, which, were not people who were following God. And so shouldn't have been a place where they moved to. but he went into the land of Moab because he was afraid, because there was a famine going on in Judah. And so, then the questions come up: how am I going to provide for my family? How am I going to put food on my table? How, like, what do I do for work, right? If his job was a farmer, there goes his job, right? So like all of the fears that we have of what am I going to do without this comes up. And in that moment, what I encourage the youth with, and what I pray as an encouragement on this podcast is choose faith, right?
Yes.
You might be in a position where you are asked to do something that goes against what you believe, that goes against what you believe God is calling you to. And in those moments, man, you can either choose to give in and to do it because that's what people want from you, or that's what people expect from you, and you're afraid that, man, I could lose my job. I could, if I lose my job, I lose my pay, and if I lose my pay, I lose my house, and if I lose my house, all this stuff. But at the end of the day, you're compromising your character. And God cares so much more about character. Trust him that, like, man, I'm not saying like if you get fired, be lazy and just, wait for God to come through. Like, obviously put in the work, right? Maybe that is God's way of showing you, hey, it's time to leave this job. It's time. I'm calling you to something new. I'm calling you to something different. So just, man, have faith that whatever it is, if you refuse to corrupt your character, if you say, no, that's not what God's calling me to, I'm going to continue to follow him, he will lead you into the right spot that you need to be in. And you'll praise him for it, because it's going to be much, much, much better than if you compromise yourself, or if you choose to do things in your own plan out of fear.
That's
Amen.
good. Yeah.
That makes me think of Daniel. Daniel chapter 1, I'll read verse 8, but Daniel, he was a captive who was taken from Jerusalem, and he's taken over to Babylon, and he was serving in the king's court. And in Daniel chapter 1 verse 8 it says, it went all the way down. Okay, it says, but Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine that he drank. Therefore he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself. So there was all this unclean food that they wanted the captives like Daniel to eat. And he said, no, I'm not going to defile my conscience, defile or blaspheme my God by partaking in this sin. And, he trusted in God, and God provided, because he put he put up to a test. He said, hey, only let us eat vegetables and see if we grow, see if we're healthy after so many days. And he only ate vegetables, and he was strong still. And that was just a miracle from God that we miss and overlook in that story. But we can't fear man, because God will always provide. And that works with work, that works with everything. Jehovah Jireh, the Lord will provide. So,
amen. Do you believe it? Come on.
Praise God forevermore.
Let's go.
So
that's a word. All right. So I feel like, do you guys have anything else to add on to that before we?
I think that was good.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Let's swing over to how do we relate to our coworkers. In your guys' experience, what has been the relationship between you and your coworkers, for good, for bad, for ugly?
I think it's a mixed bag of peace for sure. I've had good coworkers. I've had awful coworkers. I probably at times I haven't been the best coworker as well. The Bible says, love your neighbors, love your enemies. You're supposed to love everybody around you. And even if it's a troublesome coworker that you have to deal with, who you guys just have different personalities, different beliefs, you're still to show them love, show them grace, mercy, all those different things. So
yeah, man, you nailed it at the end there. I was gonna say that. That I agree with Eli 100%. There could be situations where there's there's always just that one coworker, that kind of like tests you on a daily basis. And you, again, like I was saying earlier, you got to stand firm. You can't break it. Sometimes, the enemy will find ways to test you in all aspects. And work is definitely one of them, because, I feel like, we have this saying of, I have my family and then I have my work family, because they technically do become your family, because you're seeing them sometimes
40
more than
hours
your
a week.
actual you're seeing them a lot. You're
Yeah.
spending time with these people, and so they're for sure gonna be times where you guys are gonna butt heads and not agree about things, or just there's gonna be a back and forth with, again, like I said, one specific coworker. But you just have to know, like how Eli was saying, like in the end you just got to show them love, because eventually it's gonna throw them off, and they're gonna be like, man, maybe I'm out of line. Maybe I gotta see, if I'm the one who's actually not doing the correct thing, because all I'm getting back is just love.
Yeah.
And then you start like kind of being like how you're mentioning that light, and yeah, you can definitely be effective in that way, instead of trying to fight fire with fire. It's
For sure.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I think of just in my personal experience when it's come to coworkers. I think back to the job that I had before I came on staff here at the church was I worked at Chick-fil-A for about a year and a half, 2 years. The Lord's Chicken, loved it.
Greatest
To this
fast food
day.
restaurant on
my
this
wife
planet.
loves Chick-fil-A.
It's the best, man. I mean, yeah, I don't know if I know anyone who doesn't enjoy a good chicken sandwich or some of those chicken
They must be a
nuggies.
Chicken
heathen.
sandwich is actually pretty good.
Slaps.
Yeah.
If you don't like Chick-fil-A, I just want to say right now, you need to repent.
Are you guys spicy chicken sandwich or original?
I usually go original.
Yeah,
I like
No
spicy.
pickles.
spicy.
Yeah.
I knew you would.
They're both
I'm
bomb.
such a Hispanic, bro.
But anyway, so I worked at Chick-fil-A, and there were some people that I worked with. I remember there was this one day where this girl that I was working with, she always kind of had like a little bit of an attitude, like little bit of a sassy side, right? She would, a lot of times it was kind of jokingly, and we like people would like poke fun with her and everything. But there was this one day where she just like, you could tell, man, she was in a bad mood, and she like shows up, she's there for maybe 20 minutes, she's just like not having it today, and she just gets up and walks out, like doesn't tell a manager, doesn't even clock out, just like over it, right? And I remember at the moment I was like, what the heck just I was like, that's dramatic, right? Like I hate to say it, but in the moment all of these like judgmental thoughts of like, oh my gosh, I would never do that, right? Like, how dare she? Like, that's so disrespectful. But I really had to like check myself with it and understand that, man, my coworkers are people too, right? That I don't know what she's going through. I don't know what her home life is like right now. She may have just been given the worst news that day.
There you go.
And I'm sitting here passing judgment because I've seen a piece of her day instead of all of the stuff that she has going on.
Yeah.
And so I think, like you guys were saying, err on the side of grace, right? If a coworker is upsetting you, if a coworker has become frustrating, I think sometimes it warrants a conversation, right?
Yeah.
Like if you have a coworker who every time you email them, they take like 5 days to respond, maybe hit them up and be like, hey, I would really appreciate if you could respond to me in a timely manner, right?
Yeah.
But also, like, just being able to give people the benefit of the doubt and understand that, hey, they might have stuff going on.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna, be the coworker who just makes them feel worthless or less than just because of these few incidents we've had.
Exactly.
Yeah. Working in HR specifically, employees, my coworkers came up to me with all types of different emotions. Sometimes extremely sad after losing family members. Sometimes angry with their supervisors or other coworkers. And I think Galatians 6:2, it says, bear each other's burdens and then so fulfill the law of Christ. And just meeting people where they're at, your coworkers, if they're sad, meeting them and that, being like, hey, what's going on? Even asking that you can pray for them. That goes such a long way. I've heard so many testimonies where, people said that, I asked this person if they needed prayer, and they started breaking down and sharing their heart. And we can do that exact same thing for our coworkers. And that's what, as Christians, we really should do, be that light in our workplace.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah. I think too, going on the other side of the spectrum, for us to make sure that we don't fall or blend too much into the work environment that is a toxic one. Because sometimes we can do that. We can separate, again, like I was saying, the church and work environment, the church family to the work family, where we're acting one way at church, but once we're clocked in at work, we're over here cussing, we're over here, you know, going along with the dirty jokes, and it's sometimes, I mean, myself, man, guilty. I've done it before, where, you know, we're doing these things, and we need to be very mindful of that, because, you know, we can't, like you're talking about the two-face, we can't do that. You know, we need to stay strong on what we're doing. And yeah, I get it. Sometimes you might feel peer pressure to laugh at a joke that was said, but if you know in your heart that, hey, I should not be laughing at this right now, maybe get up and walk away. Just, you know, that way you're not a sore thumb in the middle of like, dude, why aren't you laughing at this? But we all are. Then just remove yourself from that environment, and try your best to not blend in too well with the things that are going on at your work. Yeah.
The last thing that I was just thinking through that I wanted to touch on before we move on to the next kind of relationship is just when you have coworkers that, you know, you are frustrated with, have disagreements with, whatever. There's been times where, again, going back to like my Chick-fil-A days, that's for whatever reason, like that's the easiest analogies that I have, or illustrations that I have. I remember there were a few, I think I was 20 at the time, 20, 21, something like that, when I was working there. And there were a few like 16-year-olds that I was working with, right? And so they would like show up, they just didn't, like, things didn't click for them, they didn't understand the job. They would kind of just drag their feet. I remember like looking at them and be like, why are you moving so slow? Why does it take you 10 minutes to wipe down a table? And I, like, again, I had to check my heart and think, okay, how can I, rather than just sitting back and judging them, how can I help them? Right? How can, again, ownership, right? This is my job. We are a team. We're not working against each other, but we're working with each other. So what can I do to help you be better at your job too, right? And not putting yourself in this imaginary leadership position where you're the assistant to the regional manager or anything like that, and giving yourself, you know, reference. A fake authority and, you know, lording that over people, but in a way that you are just, you know, you have the same role as them, and you're just like, hey, I just want to help. Yeah. What can I do?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Don't be a Dwight.
Don't be a Dwight. Don't be a Dwight. All right. So let's swing it over to, we talked about bosses. We talked about coworkers. What about the people that work beneath us? Yes. I don't know. This is a young adults podcast, so I don't know how many people have people underneath them right now, but I feel like even if you don't yet,
I think it's critical because, you know, we're going to rise up in the ranks and take on different positions. And for me, working in HR I'm 20 years old, now 21, with tons of 400 people who are under me, basically, who come up to me, asking me different questions and need different things and need advice, and we make influential decisions that have to do with people's jobs, if they get hired, fired, or not. And in that, really what the Lord told me was, you need to be a servant leader. You know, our motto, like I said, my boss, she was a Christian. She said, how may we serve you? And just having the mindset as leaders to say, hey, these people who are under me, I'm working for them. Because Christ with his disciples, what did he do? He washed their feet, right? It's like, do we have that same mindset when we're going to work and we see our superiors or our even not employees, what are they called? People who come into work? Customers. Yes, that's the word. Customers. Perfect. Even our customers, or do we have that servant mindset to say, hey, regardless of my position or title, am I working to meet your needs, not just my own? So
yeah, I think I would go back to what you were saying earlier, Christian, about the team. We're a team. Whether or not you're the superior or whether or not you're under your superior, it's at the end of the day, we're a team. And I think in order to have a successful team, you need to lead them well. You can't sit there just barking demands. Like, you need to sometimes go down to their level, and be like, hey, I'm gonna meet you eye to eye. Is there something that I can, do for you? Like you were saying, Eli, like, is there something that I can, take off your hands? Like try to understand where your employees are, if because sometimes you can task them with things and not realize that you're over tasking like these specific things to them that maybe it's a little overwhelming, and maybe they're stressed out, and since they see you as a superior, they don't want to share that with you because they feel like their job will be in jeopardy. So maybe once in a while, just kind of check in with them, and be like, hey, how are you guys doing? Is there something that, you feel like is a little too much that, we can maybe give to somebody else to handle that? Because I've come across that sometimes where there would be someone that had a task that they couldn't necessarily follow through with, but they failed to share that because they were scared that, something negative was going to come out of that. And it's like, no, man, like it's a job, and it's going to get stressful, but it's important for us as the superior or boss to make sure that again, like we're talking to them, we're understanding them, because if you don't know what's going on in their little cubicles or their like little spot, then how are you able to even know like that they're handling everything correctly the way it should be done? So
Yeah, that's good, man. I mean, essentially what we're talking about is we're talking about leadership position, right? I like that you brought up the term servant leader. I took a management class in my undergrad that walked through just like different managerial styles. And one of the things that we talked about in that class is that there is one managerial style that actually winds up like 9 times out of 10 being the best managerial style. And that is servant leadership. That is when you are able to put yourself in the trenches with those who work for you, right? There's something so special about lowering yourself, humbling yourself, and saying that, hey, your job is not above me. I don't think that I'm better than you because my position is higher in the org chart, or because there's more money in my paycheck. Like if we can work together, like that's what we're gonna do. And so again, it goes back to how can I make your job easier, 100%. Right? That's really the role of a leader, to lead those people to do the best work that they can do, right? And man, there's so many resources on how to be a good leader.
Good books, so much in the Word. There's, even in the Word it says, shepherds know the state of your flock. So leaders know how your people are doing. Have check-ins with them, one-on-ones with them, mentor them. Just like in the church, we're to be making disciples. As leaders, we should be making leaders. So we should really be checking in, like, hey, how are you doing? How are things at home? Oh, how's your dog doing? No, you just got a new puppy. Being invested in their lives, and not only just being that, oh, I'm their manager, but really caring about them as a person first and foremost should always be our greatest desire.
So leadership is one of the things that we talk about a lot in this church. Like at least behind closed doors as a staff, we are constantly talking about leadership. And so there's a few kind of just good leadership nuggets that I've picked up over my time here.
Sliding this way.
Let's go.
So, take my notes out.
It's not prepared, but this is just stuff that I'm like, has been super, super helpful for me. One thing has been, that before you can lead others, you need to know how to lead yourself. So if you fail at leading yourself, if you fail at self-discipline, if you fail at waking up at a consistent time in the morning, if you fail at taking care of yourself, man, you are not going to be in a good place to lead others well, right?
That's good.
And that's one of the reasons why we talk about this all the time in youth ministry, that you need to take care of yourself and your relationship with God before you can ever expect to lead a student into a relationship with God, right? So yeah, maybe just, if this is the position that you're in, think through, how am I doing in this? Am I leading myself well? Another thing that I was actually just talking to my wife about this the other day is this idea of we were watching an episode of The Office, and I was like, oh man, that it's this episode where how familiar are you guys with The Office? You guys remember when Charles Minor comes in Idris Elba. It's like the Michael Scott Paper Company
I don't remember
season.
that one.
No, all right. All my Office super nerds.
Josh Bird.
Tonight.
Yep, I know this one.
There's this episode where this guy, Charles Miner, he's the COO, and he comes in, and Michael Scott has left the company at this point, and he asks Jim for this like report. He says, "Hey, I need a rundown." Mm-hmm. And Jim, the whole episode is just him trying to figure out what the heck a rundown is. He's like, I don't know what I'm supposed to give this man.
Yeah.
And it made me think of this leadership principle that I've just heard, a bunch of times over the years, that to be unclear is to be unkind. To be unclear is to be unkind. And
good.
so if the people underneath you don't know what you expect of them or what you're asking for, then you're putting them in a position where they are more stressed.
Yeah.
They're more anxious. They're afraid of letting you down, so they're going to do a worse job. So as leaders, one of the things that we can do is we can just ask questions like, does that make sense? Do you have any questions about that?
That's good.
Just clarify so that,
key.
Everyone understands what's going on.
Yeah. That's big.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that come to the top of my head. Yeah. But if you guys are interested in like looking into more leadership stuff, man, a few resources that I would look into is Craig Groeschel Leadership Podcast. He's the senior pastor over Life Church.
Yep.
And he has this leadership podcast that just has such good stuff. John Maxwell is one of my favorite leadership authors. He's written tons of books on the topic of leadership, but just when it comes to being in that role, so much good stuff.
Something even to think about in my message, I was speaking about how masters, everyone falls under Christ. We are all to be obedient to him first and foremost. It doesn't matter title, position, CEO, king, president, whatever it is. All of us have to be have the humility to recognize that we're humans and we serve the living God, and that should change the way that we lead, the way that we manage others and serve others, for sure. So
Absolutely.
Praise God forevermore.
Praise God.
Yes, sir. You guys got any other final thoughts about work? Just past experiences, stuff like that.
I think one that you mentioned earlier was in the work environment of us serving, I guess, what it would be customers or clients and things like that. I think I want to hear a little bit about that, your guys' experience in that.
Working, so few experiences. I'll talk about the riots because that was an interesting experience. When I was 2020, COVID, everything happened, whole social justice movement, whatever, right? There were all these riots, and we got activated as the National Guard, and we were serving the communities downtown LA, Santa Monica, all over the place, and people came up angry. "Oh, get out of our communities, blah, 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 blah." Just think about a berating customer. And in that, as a Christian, thinking back, like, what is my responsibility who am I supposed to be in this moment? And I look straight back to Jesus Christ, right? What was he doing when he was being led to the cross? When people were spitting on him, pulling out his beard, he was still being humble. He was still being loving. Stephen, when he was being martyred, he was being stoned. He said, "Lord, forgive them." And it's the same mindset that we should have with customers who might be difficult. We should love them and meet them where they're at and say, "Hey, we don't know what these people are going through," just like you said, our coworkers. We can't judge these people off of a moment, but we could always control what we can control. And that's biggest thing is control yourself and resemble Christ, even in the midst of strife or tension or anything like that. So
the first thing that comes to my mind is there was this, specifically with customers, again, Chick-fil-A. There was this one day where a friend of mine who was working in the drive-thru, she was like salt of the earth, man, like such a good, kind-hearted person. Like everyone who knew her, like, man, really, really appreciated her. And she was working in the drive-thru, and for whatever reason, like, she had gotten this person's order a little bit mixed up, or it was something super minor, easy to fix. and this person comes through the drive-through, and it must have been having a bad day, or just unfortunately a jerk of a person. Just like lays into her, tells her how awful she's doing at her job, tells her that she should be fired. And she, like, of course, when you're just being berated by a customer, she walks away and she just starts bawling. Like, someone needs to fill in for her on drive-through and everything. And so when we ask that question of, like, how are we to relate to customers in those difficult moments, there's not really a ton of great advice of, like, what to do in that, other than just don't take it personally. Don't take it personally.
That's big too.
That's good.
Like, it's just a one moment, right? They don't know you. They don't know, like, you might be phenomenal at your job and you might just have an off moment or an off day. And, like, you need to surround yourself with people in that moment to encourage you, to lift you up, right? And that's where, if we're being the kind of coworker that we would want others to be for us, it's going to be a natural thing. All of our coworkers surrounded her and said that person is full of it. Like, they need to go get help, because like, everything they said was wrong, right? And you need people in those moments to lift you up and to speak truth into your life, and not let you stir in just one disgruntled customer's opinion.
I agree. There, for a good couple of years, I was in the serving business as a server, and my gosh,
you've got stories.
I've got people that walked out, on food, and skipped the bill. But there's always, especially in that industry too, there's always going to be times where, I guess it can just go with the customer service work environments, that you're going to run into somebody who's going to go off on you. And man, that story you shared, that's I don't even know that girl. I feel for her the moment you said she walked away and started crying, because I've witnessed things like that. Fortunately enough, I'm able to take those things. Like, if someone comes at me like that, I'm able to just be like, you know what, okay, it's fine. I'll go get the manager. I'll be right back. But I think to consistently have that mentality of, like, you know what, I'm just gonna pray for this person, man. I'm gonna, when they walk out, I gotta pray for them. Maybe they're going through something, and like how you were sharing earlier, that you set that example of, like, maybe they got bad news that day, or maybe they woke up on the wrong side of the bed, and they saw an excuse to let out their anger, and they let it out on you. But I think we need to, like, keep our composure and just know, like, hey, you know what, I'm sorry. Let me try to correct this for you, and just try to do it in the kindest way possible. That's every approach I've ever made, in situations like that. So
Earlier you said never fight fire with fire, and it's the same thing when dealing with customers. Always take the humble, Christ-like road, no matter what anyone does. Someone treats you poorly, someone treats you great. In all situations, strive to be like Christ. There should be the wristbands. What would Jesus do? Sometimes you need to have that mindset in work. Like, how would Jesus respond to this situation?
That's good.
So,
because so often too, when you take the high road, the other person realizes, I'm the worst right now. The other person is like, this, I just laid into this person, and they've been so patient with me. They've been so understanding with me, and it, like, if the person has any kind of sort of decency in them, it'll usually lead them to, hey, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have blown up. You're doing a great job, right? And a complete reversal of what just took place. But sometimes we don't get that, and sometimes it's just just learning to let things go and know that hey, it's part of living in a fallen world, man.
Exactly.
Sometimes we do get to see that happen. Like, there was this coworker, he had COVID, didn't get his pay. There's just a lot going on. So when he called me, he wouldn't tell me his name. He was cussing. He was angry. And I was like, let me just be loving and gentle right now and try to help him. And I was gentle with him. And finally he opened up. He was like, sorry, I'm behind him, telling me a lot of personal stuff, going in on that, and recognizing that, hey, I know it's not your fault. I'm just really trying to get to the bottom of this. And in 10-minute conversation, the attitude flipped, everything changed. We were able to get to the root of the problem and fix it. And when you keep a level head, you stay calm and really just, let me say, I'm going to act like Christ. Things usually work out. And it's like seeing the beauty of the restoration of relationships in that is huge a lot of times too.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
That's good. God. I think there's a lot of good stuff in this convo. I hope that, anyone who's listening with us today, that you guys get a lot out of this convo. Mm-hmm. I feel like I want to be a better worker now. Better worker, better leader, better customer, right? I want to treat the people who serve me so much better.
Oh, that's a good one too.
Yeah. So we pray that, you guys are just blessed by this convo. If you have, anything to contribute to the conversation, if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and throw something in the comments. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify Podcasts, just, drop us a review. Let us know, how this podcast is ministering to you.
Follow us on Instagram at VantagePointYA.
Let's go.
Connect with us. Every single Tuesday night we meet here at VantagePoint Church at 7 p.m. So we hope to see you guys there pretty soon. If not, live streams, catch us on YouTube as well.
That's all we got.
Alrighty then, you guys have a good one.
We're out.
We're out.